What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? BizzyDad here. You there checking out the latest deck build video. And I'm going to kick it off as always by saying hello to my latest subscribers this week. Roll them in at the bottom. There they are. They are in for the cause. Thank you guys so much. Let's keep the roll going. Always great to get new subscribers. And by the way, if you are a subscriber and I have not immortalized you at the bottom scroll of one of these deck build videos, it could be because of your privacy settings. I know that I have a couple of people who subscribe to me, but because their accounts are private, I don't actually get to see them on my subscriber list. So to all my shadow subs out there who I don't know who you are, but you are a subscriber, thank you. Thank you so much. And just, you are our heroes in the dark. So I really appreciate that. So let's get into the profile for the deck I call Mount St Sylvia. This is a red-green all-out attack. This is an assaulting deck. A little bit out of my comfort zone. I like to play defense and counterpunch, but there are a lot of players who are all about aggression, who are all about red rush, so I've decided to build a little bit of a deck to your guys, to tribute to you guys, and this is going to be fun to play. Again, I always like to put in a couple of fun cards you wouldn't expect or you don't normally see. So our ruler is Sylvia Gill Palarilias. Did I say it right? I hope so. Sylvia is a really strong ruler. She has a judgment of 1 red, 1 green, and 2 others, and a really great ability to use on her ruler side. Fire magic stones you control gain the ability to produce green. So red equals green as long as you are on Sylvia's ruler side. It's just something to keep in mind. Once you J activate and do judgment and flip her over, you lose that ability. So just keep that in mind. And when we do pay it, we flip her over, and here she is in her full art glory. She's still Sylvia Gill. She is a dragon resonator. It says clan founder, but I think that's been errated to change to something else. I don't remember what it is. But Sylvia is a complete animal. 1,000, 1,000 with flying and swiftness. So just coming out of the gate on fire, literally. And there's more. When this card enters your field, it deals 1,000 damage to target J Resonator. So you go after a J ruler, go after one of your opponent's Resonators, blast them for 1,000. And whenever a J Resonator that was dealt damage by this card, this turn is destroyed, you may recover up to 3 magic stones you control. So just an unbelievable perk. Sylvia comes in, she gets to blast somebody for 1,000, and if she does and kills them, you get to recover 3 magic stones. This magic stone recovery is also continuous. So every turn that Sylvia is on the field and she attacks somebody, she only gets to burn for the 1,000 once. But every time she deals damage and destroys a J Resonator, you get to recover 3 magic stones. So just really strong on both sides. The only negative is when you flip her over, you lose the ability for your firestones to make green. So as long as she's on her ruler side, red makes green. Once she flips over, red doesn't make green anymore. So please keep that in mind. Go into our stone lineup here, and we have 4 magic stone of blasting waves. We're going to blast somebody here with the blasting waves. This is a dual stone that gives us access to both red and green. And I also just run 6 basic firestones because red will make green as long as we're on Sylvia's ruler side. I keep the dual stones in here, red and green, because once we do J activate, we're going to need access to green. We have a little splash of green. Green is our support in this deck, but we're still going to need them even after Sylvia flips over. So that's why we have the blasting waves to give us that green access. We'll go into Resonators, and we'll kick it off with 4 copies of Rukh Egg. It's a 1-drop red Resonator, 0 attack, 200 defense, and this card cannot attack. We've seen this card before. I use this for my Cthulhu deck as well, and once it enters the graveyard from your field, you get to search your deck for a fire Resonator. So a card that automatically replaces itself, a card that might make your opponent pause a little bit before attacking you because chances are you'll block with the Rukh Egg to get a fire Resonator. And we have a lot of fire Resonators to dig out here. 4 copies of the Flame Sprite, a 1-drop, 200, 300. It is a fairy. but it has flying and swiftness. So this is every red deck's favorite first turn. If you can get the Flame Sprite, you put her out there turn 1, flying and swiftness right away. Especially if you go first, your opponent has no stones to block. This is an easy 200 damage. Flame Sprite is really good. She can also rest and deal 100 damage to target Resonator for each fairy you control. So while that ability is a little more catered to fairy decks where you're flooding the board, and she could do a lot of damage that way. You know what? If you could pop somebody for 100 or maybe 2 if you got 2 Flame Sprites on the board, that's not bad to have. We have 4 copies of Sylvia's Clanmate. Here is a dragon, 2-drop dragon, 1 red and 1 other. 400 attack and defense with flying. So that's good. If you can get her to stick, the next turn you can swing away, no blocks. You'll get the 400 damage through. You could banish this card and you pay 1 less to play judgment abilities of your ruler this turn. So here's why the Clanmate's in the deck. 4/4 flyer, not bad, but you could banish it and then all of a sudden judgment is 1 less. So we definitely want to take advantage of that. Also for a red, this card will gain plus 100 attack until end of turn. So if you're not in a position to J-activate, or if you got really nothing else going on and you can attack with the Clanmate, no blockers on hand, you could take a red stone or 2, pump it up to 500 attack, 600 attack. Just a way to add to the rush to try to get more damage in. We have 4 copies of True Successor of Certo, Volga. This is one of our newer cards from BFA. It is a King Resonator, 2-drop, 2 red to play, 400 attack and defense, and whenever this card is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to your opponent. So while his attacking is not really what he's about, he is really just a deterrent from your opponent attacking. Because if your opponent has a 1000 Resonator and swings at you, and you block with Volga, yes, Volga dies, but because Volga took 1000 damage from your opponent's Resonator, your opponent now has to take 1000 damage themselves. So they're going to lose 1000 just by Volga blocking. And we have a pretty nasty trick up our sleeve with Volga that we'll get into once we unload all our surprises. Here's 4 copies of Pricia, Pursuant of Exploding Flame. This is a great card. A 3-drop, 1 red, 1 green, and 1 other to play. It's a Beast Resonator with swiftness, target attack, and first strike. 700 attack, 400 defense. So the first strike really comes in handy here because her 400 defense, she's really open to so many kills if she attacks head on and has to take damage. She's open to a lot of kill spells. We'll get her too. For 1 green, the card will gain flying until the end of turn. So you could put her out on the field with her swiftness. And if you have a green stone, throw it out there and she'll sneak in 700 damage flying really quick on her first turn. But here's why your opponent might want to keep her on the field. Because when this card is put into a graveyard from your field, it deals 500 damage to your opponent. So when Pricia dies, your opponent gets blasted for 500. So you can see the theme in the deck is to find all these ways for your opponent to take damage. So even if they're doing good in getting rid of a Resonator on your board, they're potentially going to take damage themselves. I want to get into our Regalia because it is very key to this deck, and it is 4 copies of Laevateinn, the Demon Sword. Now, there's a lot of text on this deck, on this card. I'm sorry. First of all, your J ruler gains swiftness, which is nice. Sylvia already has swiftness, but this is in case you use it for somebody else. You can rest the card, and until the end of turn, if your J ruler would deal damage, it would deal that much plus 200 instead. So rest the card. We have Sylvia here, so Sylvia does 1000 attack. So if you would rest it, she would be dealing 1200 damage. And a pretty neat trick is to rest this card before recovery because it's plus 200 boost until the end of turn. So you rest it before recovery, then recover everything, rest it again, and now Sylvia will be dealing plus 400 damage when she comes out. So it's pretty nasty, especially for Sylvia, who will come out and hit somebody for 1000 just on enter. That'll now be 1400. And then she gets to swing with flying and swiftness. And if she gets your opponent or another Resonator, it's another 1400. So really nasty card. There's more text under that for Imperishable, but that is for Melgus. This is a Melgus specific Regalia. You can also banish a Resonator and recover this card. So that's a pretty neat trick. A good way to pop our own Rukh Eggs if our opponent is not doing it. We can use this we can rest it, pump up Sylvia, even if we don't flip her over. Rest it to pump her up, and then banish the Rukh Egg to recover it. And if our opponent doesn't want to kill our Rukh Egg, we'll kill our own and get our own Fire Resonator. You can discard another card named Laevateinn the Demon Sword and produce a red will. So if you have an extra one in your hand and you want to make a big play, don't have an extra red will, just discard one while this is on the field, discard the one in your hand, and you get to produce a red will. And that comes in more handy than you'd think, especially in the couple of games I have played with this and testing. It's always nice to have that extra one. Good combo if you could banish the Clanmate, make the judging cheaper by one, and then you have this card in your hand to produce the red will. You can even make it cheaper. You can also banish the Laevateinn, and your J-Ruler gains imperishable until the end of turn. So a good safety net, just hit the table with my knee and it hurt. It's a good safety net and a good way to get Sylvia out of some trouble. So Laevateinn is really strong, a really integral part of this deck. It really makes so many things happen and helps our combos. Going into our spells, we have 3 copies of Rapid Growth. This is a great card. 1 green spell chant instant. You can do this at any time. And it says, target J Resonator gains +4/+4 until end of turn. This also has the Remnant ability, which means you can play it out of your graveyard for the same 1 green cost. But if you do play it out of your graveyard, you do have to remove it from the game afterwards. But this could be done on the same turn. So you can pay the 1 green, pump up your Resonator +4 J Resonator. You can pump up your J Ruler too. Pump up a J Resonator +4/+4, and then it goes to the graveyard. You can also, after it resolves, you can pay another green, yank it right out of the graveyard, put another +4/+4, but then it has to be removed from the game. And if you really want to embrace the red rush and really want to be nasty, if you can get the Flame Sprite in your hand, especially if you go first, you play her first, Flying and Swiftness, hit your opponent for 200 damage. It comes to your second turn. We're hoping that our opponent played his or her stone that first turn, so they're all tapped out. Our second turn, we don't call in any Resonators. We use both of our stones. We'll declare our attack for 200 flying. We'll use Rapid Growth to pump her up to 600 attack. And then we'll use our second stone right out of the graveyard to bring it back out. And all of a sudden, the Flame Sprite has just hit your opponent for 1,000 damage on turn 2. That is nasty, and just an example of how Red Rush works. We're just exploiting so many different ways to kill our opponent as fast as possible. If you see the Flame Sprite come out in this deck, especially on turn 1, don't be surprised if turn 2 you get smacked for another 1,000. Really nasty trick. We have 3 copies of High Speed Dash. I really wasn't big on this card when I first read it, but I think it has a decent place in here, especially with our willingness. We want to punish and deal so much damage. So it's another 1-drop, 1 green instant, and it says choose 1. You could put your J Ruler into your ruler area as a ruler, or you can return target Resonator you control to its owner's hand. So both applications are pretty good here, but the main reason we have High Speed Dash in the deck is for Sylvia. We want to judge with her, let her come out, deal her damage to a Resonator, recover stones, swing at our opponent with Flying and Swiftness for at least 1,000, and then after she's done causing all that trouble, we use our green stone, High Speed Dash, and we just put her right back in our ruler area, where guess what? Next turn, she's going to judge and come back out again for another 1,000 burn and another 1,000 Flying and Swiftness. If that is not an option, and one of our Resonators are in trouble and we want to bring it back to our hand, we can always do that too. But this is mainly for Sylvia. So after she could judge, punish, beat everybody up, flip her back to her ruler area where she's safe, and then the next turn, do it all over again. So really nasty trick, really way to just have Sylvia punish her opponent. I have 4 copies of Bombardment. This is the new Thunder. And it is a 2-red instant, again, happening at any time. And it says this card deals 600 damage to target player or Resonator. So really you want to hit your opponent. If you can, just throw another 600 at their face. But if they have a tricky Resonator that you don't want on the board, you can hit them too. You can hit Volga with this if you want. and then your opponent's going to deal 600. Your opponent's going to have to take 600 damage too, but why not? Why wouldn't you do that? You would just hit him straight on with the 600. But that really is the nasty trick with Volga. If we can get Volga out on the field and have him stay out there, when we flip Sylvia over, we get to deal at least 1,000. So let's pretend there's no pump. There's no stat pump. We get to deal 1,000 to one target Resonator. Well, I'm going to pick Volga because, yes, he dies. We just killed our own guy. But since he got dealt 1,000 damage, your opponent is going to have to take 1,000 damage. And then you get to recover 3 of your magic stones because you killed a Resonator with Sylvia's Enter ability. How nasty is that? And then after he's gone, we'll just swing at our opponent for another 1,000 or 1,200 if we have a Laevateinn pump. Just really throwing it in our opponent's face, all the damage. And then maybe after all that, we just high-speed dash Sylvia back to our ruler side in our ruler area, and maybe we can just hit her again the next turn. Maybe get another Volga out there and just really bring the pain. It's a lot of fun. Here is Memory of Flame. It is a spell chant standby. So you pay 2 to put this face down in your standby area. And the trigger is whenever you play a spell chant or spell chant instant card. And if that spell chant does damage, it does that plus 600 instead. So this is really catered and tailor-made for Bombardment. We get the Memory of Flame face down in our standby area, let it sit there for a while. If our Resonators aren't coming together, if our big Sylvia attack isn't ready just yet, we can always throw out a Bombardment. If our opponent accepts the damage, we flip over Memory of Flame, and now he's taking 1,200 damage instead of 600. If you can get 2 copies of this in the standby and 2 bombardments in your hand, you can potentially double bombardment mid to late game, hit your opponent for 2,400, might be enough to do it. So again, you see the theme of the deck, just real nasty, real aggressive, and just right in your opponent's face. Finally, here is the name behind the deck. Here is Certo, the Blazing Volcano. This is the Mount St Sylvia. And here's a really nasty card and the fun card that I promised to put in the deck, like I always do. A 2-drop field edition, 1 red and 1 other. It says players cannot gain life. And whenever a Resonator is put into a graveyard from a field, this card deals 100 damage to each player. So, light decks that like to gain life, if you're playing angels like Celestial, Winged Seraph, and Lucifer that have lifelink, whenever they deal damage, the player gains that much life. Nope, not anymore. Certo is going to sit there and make sure nobody gains life. And anytime a Resonator hits the graveyard from either field, from yours or your opponent's, everybody takes 100 damage. And so that is pretty gruesome, and especially since there are so many cards in our deck that deal damage. We have our Sylvia on the board whenever she dies, or if we really want to be nasty, we could take our Laevateinn, rest it to pump Sylvia up, whether she judges or not. And then, hey, how about we banish Pricia to the graveyard to recover? Well, she hits the graveyard, so your opponent takes 500 damage. And if the mountain is out, everyone's going to take an extra 100. So your opponent eats 600 because you banished your own Pricia. So again, just nasty little tricks, and just we want to attack our opponent. We want our opponent to lose life every single turn, especially if they can't gain life. If we can get that nasty little flame sprite rapid growth double hit on turn 2, put the volcano out in turn 3, your opponent is not going to know what to do right away, especially if they can't recover. If they're down over 1,000 life off the bat, and now they can't gain any, and we're just rushing with the swiftness and the flyers and the Sylvia, it could potentially be over really quick. So it's a really strong deck, a really aggressive deck. And I want to go into the sideboard. And the sideboard, again, always situational. But since I'm a defensive player, I wanted to think of defense. And that's really what the sideboard is. And a couple of these cards you have seen before, especially in my Yggdrasil Tree deck. 4 copies of Destructive Assault. It is a 1-drop green spell chant to destroy target edition or Regalia. And this might come in handy when you're playing against somebody who's Regalia heavy, or who has pretty tough additions. Barrier of Shadows is something I'm thinking of because it's going to make us have to pay 1 more for Laevateinn abilities. Just a great card to have in the sideboard, and if you play somebody with additions of Regalia, you add this, and then you could just start popping them for 1. I considered Maribel the Steel Doll instead, but she only targets Regalia, and you have to pay a lot more. That's just a 1-drop to kill it. 4 copies of the Enraged Knight. It's spelled enraged on the card, but that is a typo. Way to go, quality assurance team. I don't know how you let that one get through, but okay, fine. It got through. The Enraged Knight's a 2-drop Knight Resonator, 1 red and 1 other. 500, 500, but as long as your opponent controls a Darkness Magic Stone, this card gains +2/+2 and Swiftness. So a good little substitution, perhaps for Volga. If your opponent sees Volga and starts preparing for him, you could do a switch out in between games and put in the Enraged Knight, especially if they play Dark Stones. She's now 7/7 with Swiftness, so just another rush, another quick attack. You can just throw her right on for 2 and swing for 700 right away. Nice little option to have. I have 4 copies of Keen Sense, another good card. This is a instant, 1 green and 1 other, so 2-drop to play. And you choose one. You either cancel a target normal spell, and there's the word normal, so we can't cancel summons with these, but we can cancel regular spells like Bombardment or anything, target a Resonator, damage to a Resonator. We can cancel one of those spells, or we could destroy a target card in a chant standby area. So, you guys who play those Croco Sharks and want to put them down and build them up for the huge reveal midway through the game. If you're playing a guy like that, you can switch out for Keen Sense and hopefully pick 1 or 2 of them off in the chance standby area before they get a chance to come out and really cause trouble. And it's a cancel spell. We don't really run defense in here. We don't really run cancels. So you play against a spell heavy player. This is going to help you out too. And finally, we have 3 copies of Winced Occluded Refuge. This again is another card from my tree deck sideboard. And it is a field edition for 2, 1 green and 1 other. When this card enters your field, you draw a card, which is great. And when a spell or ability your opponent controls targets a J Resonator that you control, you could banish this card, and if you do, you cancel that spell or ability. The database does show that this cancels Flame of Outer World. We do believe this cancels Black Moonbeam too, so another good card to have, especially if you go up against someone playing Dark, someone with those Black Moonbeams. It is a way to just kind of cancel it and save Sylvia so she can swing once or twice. So guys, that is it. The deck profile for Mount St Sylvia. Really fun deck. It wants to play super fast. It wants to kill your opponent immediately. The Volcano is a very upsetting card, and I've never seen anybody play it, never seen anybody really talk about it. So I figured, why not I find a way to sneak it in and just make a nasty deck a little more nasty. So guys, tell me what you think. Did you like it? Did you hate it? In the comments below. I read them all, as you know. Like, share, subscribe, the whole 9. Let's keep it going, and we got more videos and spoilers coming soon. The spoilers have been great. So as usual, thanks for a few minutes, guys, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.